Kyle Tutors here. Good evening. We are back with another Excel video, trying to recover enough stuff from pivot tables, add some additional calculations, and then put that into a specific pivot table format to match a report that we're doing. So the big picture here is that we've got an existing pivot table, which goes over a lot of locations and amounts, and it comes down to these two numbers where you have an actual and an MRR. Seems to be some sort of budgeting thing, and if the actual divided by so if the MRR is large enough over the actual, they want to take some percentage of that, some portion of that, and redistribute it as accrual. So again, not an accountant, but I think I know what the math is doing. And then once we have that accrual, we want to match the overall report format. And so the additional amount to accrue is what we're putting together. And they want that organized by market across the columns, and then these QBR roll, which has 3 different segments and then a total. And so once we get the data that includes that additional labor to accrue, then we can roll it into this pivot chart. But the complication here is that there's some data in this pivot that I can't access, because once you start doing calculations using the data, if you move the rows around by changing what's in the pivot table, then it blows up these calculations over here. So it's always difficult to mess with pivot tables with additional data next to it. So the key, as I fumbled around and tried to figure out what to do here, is that I realized that whatever I do to the pivot table itself, I can't have it change the fact that it goes to 851 rows. And so that really stopped me from doing almost anything with the pivot table. And so my strategy then switched to get everything I can out of the existing pivot table as shown, use the lookup and the roll sheets here to recreate the 2 columns that I need and are missing in the pivot table, and then put the whole thing back together as a pivot table that now includes the market, the QBR roll, and these calculations to the additional amount to accrue. That was the strategy. Hopefully, it's going to look a lot smoother than it actually was, but here goes. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this tab, just so I always have the original to go back to. So I'm going to move or copy, create a copy, and I'm going to put it, we'll put it right before the sheet after it. So I'll put it before lookup. So it's separated from the by site, which is the original data. And if I were really fancy here, I'd go in here and I'd protect that sheet and just lock it down, not with a password or anything, but just so that I couldn't go in there and mess with that data accidentally. So now I'm working on this by site 2 tab. Wait, why am I not? There. Now I'm working on the by site 2 tab, which is, this one is mine to mess with. So RPT playground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of the data here, or starting from, well, let's go out to here, get everything that's kind of here, and then go all the way down to 810 by all the columns. And I'm going to paste values so that the pivot table goes away and I'm able to play with the data and do what I need to. So for some reason I'm going down and then up. Okay. And okay, so it looks like these early columns are, but I want to stop at this row 852, those grand totals. So I'm going to Control C, I'm going to copy everything, and you can see that goes from, oh, you can't see how many cells it is, but I believe I've got it all. So I'm going to copy, and now I'm going to create a new tab. Create a new tab. Oh, wait, is that one new? Okay, I'm going to create this new tab, sheet 4, and I'm going to give myself some space out here, and I'm going to, boy, everything's, paste special values. right? So now all the formatting is gone, all of the, actually, you know what? I'm going to leave the formats. I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to, yeah, there's a lot of data on the clipboard. That's why it's kind of slow. I'm going to paste special values, but keep the number, keep all the source formatting, right? I don't want to re-update the stuff. So now I've got everything's in percentages and stuff like that. So now I could recreate a pivot table, but this is missing the two things that I need. And so what we need to do now is we need to add columns for the two pieces of information that we could not recover from the pivot table. And those are having to do with the role, connecting what's listed as the role with the QBR role, which is what the final pivot table will have, and connecting the site to the market, which is the columns in the final pivot table. So in order to do this, we're going to use XLOOKUP, which is the replacement or the improvement from VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP. And so here's what we do. We're going to add ourselves a column here. And then now what XLOOKUP does, so equals XLOOKUP. First thing we want to do, what do I want to look for? I want to look for whatever is in K6. Where do I want to find it? I want to find it in the role somewhere in this column. So I'm going to look from A2 to A17 for whatever my entry is. Then I want to return the equivalent spot in this column. This is the return array. And I don't need any of the other factors about what happens if there's an error, because this is small enough that I know I'm good, I'll find it. And so I'm done. So if I hit that, now I see that AMM would count as exempt. And when I drag this down, okay, it looks like something screwed up. I just did this the first time. That's why I'm recreating it here. So the problem here is that I didn't make universal references or locked references to my two different translators on the roll sheet. So I just have to go in here and I have to hit F4 to make those absolute and never move as I drag. Right? If I do that there, now that isn't going to move, and so it'll carry all the way down. So the way I'm going to drop this down, okay, I'm going to 850, and it'll slow down for us. And I just drag that there, and just cruise back and show that, yep, looks like everything is populated nicely. So now I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, and I'm going to call this QBR roll. And for here, I'm going to pop that in a different color so I know I'm looking for it, right? That's going to be one of my key, that's going to be the column or the rows in my pivot table. And the next translation I need to do is here for site. So this is now going to be the market. Okay, that's going to be another one that I'm going to use, so I'm going to keep my eye on it. And what am I going to do that here? The lookup table here is in lookup. Over on the right side, I've got the translator between. If you give me a site, I'll tell you what market it's in. So I'm going to enter that as equals XLOOKUP. What am I looking for? I'm looking for that site code. Where am I going to find it? I'm going to find it in lookup in the site code column. And what do I want to return? I want to return the equivalent row from this identically shaped column or identically sized column. And that's it, because I know I'm going to find everything. Now I'm going to remember, and I'm going to put my F4 absolutes there. And now I'm good to go. And look, I got CAK. If I drag them down, I get all of these. And once the computer catches up, I can go the rest. Drag it down. It'll automatically slow down as I get near the end to make sure that I'm paying attention. And now I've got everything I need to make my pivot table. So at one point I needed to recalculate this amount to accrue, but I'm ready to just drop in my pivot table now, and I just want to make sure that everything looks right. Right, I know that 415,182 is the total amount, and that still matches down at the bottom, right? Can't see these numbers, so let's just double check. Yep, all those look about the same. So I'm ready to recreate my pivot table, right? And the way I'm going to do that is I select all of the data, right? So I'm going to go from here. I can leave off the totals, doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to grab everything I can. It'll make, and I don't have to use it if I don't want to. And so I don't know what that is, but it doesn't have a title. So it's going to confuse things. So I'm just going to grab, because I know what I want, grab that. And now I insert pivot table. We're going to a new worksheet, and we're going to use that highlighted area I just went. All right, and now I've got a pivot table. And so now I want to look and see from the original what I'm trying to duplicate. So I see all the markets are in columns and this QBR role here, right? And so let's just start there and see what we get. So I'm going to go back to sheet 2, and I'm going to call that one now accrual pivot. So I'll know what I'm looking at. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start adding things. So I know I want my columns to be the market. So I'm going to select market. It's going to throw it there. I'm like, nope, give me columns. That looks about right. I got this whole AMZL regional here that the original puts it at the end. And so I'll show you how I kludged that to make it look right, but it's not going to be right in terms of copying it. And now down here on my rows, I want that QBR code, QBR role, and that's going to set me up here, which is pretty much what I want. And now what do I want for the values? I want my additional amount to accrue. Right, pop that. This looks about right. It looks like what we're looking for. I've gotten, so things I'm noticing here that are different from here is, one, I don't have this date worked multiple items filter. And it turns out I can't have that because I don't have, I didn't have the date worked code in the pivot table to be able to play with it. So this will work for this quarter, but we would create this pivot table straight from the data rather than undo a pivot table and put it back in. And then the other thing is that this Amazon here, all the Amazon or AMZL regional is at the end. So what I'm going to do to make it look like that is I'm going to go back to my data. So I found this market here, and where that was, so I'm going to lookup, so I needed to go back to the lookup table. In here, where I see that AMZL regional, right, I just went up in here and I put an underscore, which will alphabetically move it to the end, right? And then when I have my data, it now has that. And when I go to my pivot table and I refresh, so in the pivot table, I click refresh, that's going to move over to the end. So it's not quite right, and I've still got this NA. So I've got an NA in both. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to just get rid of the edit, the NA by just getting rid of that. Right, that got rid of it in both places. It matches the format, and I think most importantly, the number is correct here, and a couple of spot checks showed that it went there properly. So at this point, I can now grab the pivot table, copy it, go back to my target where we were going to put it in here, and before, I want to make sure whether I paste it in row 24 or 25. So I'm going to look back at what I copied, and I've got that sum of additional. So that tells me I'm going to plop it in right there. Right click, paste, or paste. And there we have it. Looks correct. The numbers add up. I think that's what we're looking for. So I've found, if you have any questions, let me know. And this would be a much smoother process if we start from the actual data, where we can just get those 5 columns we need, do the calculations for the additional accrual, and then make the pivot table. So I hope this helped. I hope it explained it. And Rockpile Tutors, take care.